have a couple more vendor-related questions, then I'm going to turn to the audience to see if there's any questions out there. But I don't know if everyone in the audience is aware, but there is a list now, or a separate web page, that will list all vendors that have been removed from the approved vendor list. How often will that happen going forward? And how often will that list be updated?
The lists, both lists are updated instantly. So as soon as a vendor gets approved, and approved doesn't mean that we're testing the devices or anything. It means that the information that the vendor entered into the website meets what's required for them to enter into the website. As soon as that happens, that the button gets clicked, the vendors show up on the approved list. The same process will apply for decertification for vendors on that list. In terms of after the button's pressed, they'll show up instantly. But the process of getting to the point where you actually press that button is a long process. That's defined in the rule exactly what that process is. And the goal really is to make it so that that is an extremely rare occurrence. Really the goal is that we want to work with the vendors to correct an issue. We don't want to use, basically the decertification process is something we want to use to make sure that the vendors are in compliance, not as a punitive measure to kick vendors out of the industry. So really the goal of all this is, in an ideal world, is to never have any vendor on that decertification list. That's probably not a realistic goal. Realistically, we're going to have some vendors out there that just can't, for some reason, meet the technical specification. So hopefully it's a very rare occurrence. And if it's a rare occurrence like that, it'd be something that'd be publicized when it does happen, and it would show up on that list instantly when it occurs. But again, the goal is to make that extremely rare.
And so I hate to interrupt before anyone else jumps in, but whose duty will it be to inform the operator that the list has changed, and that the vendor that they may be using is no longer compliant? Is that their responsibility? Is it the vendor's responsibility? Whose responsibility is that, or who has the liability in that case?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, there will be communication that happens when a vendor gets published that list in terms of what the carrier's responsibility is to check that list, how often that should be done, and what kind of rules would be. Is there like a grace period? I'm not sure, and that'd be Danielle.
Well, we haven't actually set up any type of an alert system yet. There has been discussions of, whenever we publish something or something has changed, you can register for email alerts. We've talked about that. I'm sure that before the compliance day, we'll have something like that that'll be more consumer friendly, without having to go every single day and check that listing for providers that have been removed from the list. One of the things I would kind of like to add to that is, for the most part, when a provider is removed, that may be done because of an investigation or roadside inspection, et cetera. But it's not an overnight process. It's something that's going to take a while, and we've run into that process or that problem today with AOBRDs, where we went in and we did a review. We found a system function that did not meet that limited technical specification. So for the most part, what we did was we got with the provider, we discussed what the problem was with that parameter setting, ability, et cetera, and discussed a resolution. The provider fixed it and then made the software push, and you probably never even knew it occurred. So, we look to see that that's going to be pretty much the same way that it's handled. That, like I said, it's not an overnight process, and most of it will more than likely, be resolved. But, in the event that, for whatever reason, like Andrew said, that they just can't get it to work, then, we will definitely have that revocation list. It's up and active right now. Fortunately, there's no one on that. Mm-hmm. So as far as trying to get a system set up where you could probably request alerts for when information has been added, to that site. We have been discussing that, but it's, as far as I know, there's not a resolution yet.
Okay, so if I could just make sure I clarify here, Danielle. So a carrier's pulled over on the side, records are reviewed, there's a determination that it's not anything to do with the carrier, it has to do more with the system. Is the carrier going to be penalized if they're using a registered system?
That's not in the current CVSA, right? I didn't read all the way to the bottom. I don't think that's in the current CVSA publication that that she mentioned earlier. We have discussed, procedures for that. There's a lot to, this ELD rule implementation. So it all kind of comes in baby steps, so that, everything is not overwhelmed at once. That is something that's probably going to be continued. I do know there has been discussion that, for example, like a medical certificate, the driver is cited for it once, and then the next time they don't have, they do not have a record of duty status. So, whether it's going to be a progressive stage or just a cut and dry, that's going to be one of the things to be announced. She's checking the out-of-service criteria right now.
And those are available for order.
Or purchase here. I have some with me. Yeah, so like I mentioned, we added some conditions to the out-of-service criteria in anticipation of the December deadline, and one of them is if a driver carrier is using an ELD that is not authorized by FMCSA per 395.22a, they are considered to not have a record of duty status. So if you're pulled roadside or wherever, and your device won't do the data transfer because it has been deactivated and moved to the non-approved list, I think that would be a condition where you would be put out of service for 10 hours because your device is not able to do the data transfer and therefore is not an authorized device. Now, if you were able to provide the information as backup through the display screen or the print, it would be whether or not the enforcement officer checks the list itself. Because if the data transfer fails, they may just divert to the display or the print thing. But if, technically speaking, if they go to check the list and you're using a device from Adrian's company and Adrian's company is on the no good list, then you don't have a compliant device on your vehicle.
Thank you.
Since we're applying bus regulations, would it be 8 hours out of service as opposed to 10?
Yes, sorry,
It would.
8.
Thank you.